I want to see no fault divorce come back to at fault in divorce, and even public shaming for those who are at fault in divorce. I want to see abortion abolished. These are the kinds of morality and government issues that we need to get back to.
Yeah, and this is apparently from the freedom crowd, right? This guy is all about freedom. He wants his freedom. Just ridiculous. These people never believed in freedom. Never. They pretended to for a minute when it was convenient. That's as far as it ever went. This is Dusty Devers, by the by. He was a Republican candidate for office. No longer. He won. He has the position now in Oklahoma State Senate. He is an Oklahoma State Senator. Now, I don't want you guys to get your hopes down over this or anything like that. Oklahoma is a very red state. He's not going to affect national politics as heavily as he's going to affect Oklahoman politics. So those are the people that are really going to suffer. I'm sorry. You got to deal with that. But this is kind of a concerning trend to me either way, that far-right evangelical nutcases are taking office like this in the first place, even if they're not positions of real significance. I mean, look at Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert. Those were positions of significance, and they found themselves in those positions after all. Fascinatingly, this guy ran against somebody named Larry Bush. Was that his? Yeah, Larry Bush was his name. This is the guy on screen here. Larry Bush actually had some interesting positions. Let me list a few out for you here. Larry Bush was in favor of higher pay for teachers, public education, and reforming the criminal justice system. Let's read this article here. Bush congratulated Devers on a well-run campaign. He said he was disappointed by the loss. We had a great team who worked very hard, but unfortunately we came up short. That doesn't surprise me. It's Oklahoma. It's a red state. He said changes to the district presented challenges for his campaign, i.e. gerrymandering. That doesn't surprise me either. Again, it's Oklahoma. Republicans have a tendency to cheat any way they possibly can. Because of the way the district was gerrymandered, it will remain hard to flip. They took out much of the African-American vote, he said. Devers campaigned hard on culture war issues. He told Oklahoma Voice he supported abolishing abortion. He said it was outrageous that abortion pills still flow legally and that pornography and no-fault divorce remain prevalent in society. The gall of somebody being free and being allowed to do what they want with their lives, right? To look at porn on their own time? That's just wrong, man. And for somebody who doesn't love their wife anymore, to simply walk away, no hard feelings, the gall, that should not be allowed.
Quick interjection, this won't take long. I just want to say, if you want to support my channel, the best way you can do it is by watching this video to the end, or at least watching a little bit longer than you would have otherwise. YouTube's recommendation algorithm works off of watch time. You can also subscribe to the channel, like the video, and check out my Patreon. Link is in the description for that. All right, back to the video.
Devers said he was an advocate for traditional marriage and opposes drag queen story hours. Look, you can oppose that all you want. You can oppose gay marriage. You can be in favor of traditional marriage. You can be against no-fault divorce and against pornography and all that. But you know what you can't do? Impose your religious beliefs on other people, which is what he seems dead set on doing here. Bush, an insurance agent, ran as a champion of local business. He said public education was a passion and he would stand against corrupt policies that divert funds to private schools in Oklahoma City and Tulsa. Bush called for raises for public school teachers and increased classroom funding. Bush also called for reform in the criminal justice system. How do you beat that? Seems like exactly the type of person that I would want elected. And who did he run against? Who won against him? Dusty Devers, of all people. Drag queens are one of the most important issues on earth today. Abortion should be illegal. No pills to induce a medical abortion should be legalized. No-fault divorce, traditional marriage. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. So he went to this this event where he spoke, and I got a couple of clips of him speaking. You heard just a little snippet at the very beginning, but just listen to the totality of these two clips that I have by him.
When you think of a government practicing righteousness, then we have to ask, by what standard?
Okay, government should not be practicing righteousness, quote unquote. There shouldn't be any standard by which government practices righteousness. You know what government should be doing? It should be protecting people's rights. That's it. We have a list of rights. We have a right to self-defense. We have a right to freedom of speech. We have a right to freedom of religion. We have a right not to quarter soldiers in our homes, and so on and so forth. The government's responsibility is to protect those rights. Full stop. I don't want to hear anything about the government being righteous or religious or holy or whatever other nonsense you want to lay down.
Practicing righteousness, then we have to ask, by what standard? And the standard is the God who created everything and who will not be thwarted in all of his plans.
Well, if God's not going to be thwarted in all of his plans, then you don't have to worry about a thing, right? You just walk away and let him do what he's going to do, seems to me.
Everything, and who will not be thwarted in all of his plans. And if we recognize that Christ has been seated after his resurrection, was seated at the right hand of the Father, high above every rule and every authority and every name that is named, and he is now, as Revelation 1 says, the governor, the ruler of all the kings of the earth, then yes, we can recognize that there is a difference between the civil government and the church, but under that, Christ is ruling, and he is king over all.
Great. Well, I'll tell you what, when Jesus comes here and he tells me I am the king of all, I'll believe him. Just like that. That's all it's going to take. Jesus comes here and says, I am the king of this place and I call the shots. Okay, great. Until that point, I'm going to be working to make government better in my eyes. I find it fascinating, though, that Dusty Devers seems to recognize that Jesus' idea for government, or at least his version of Jesus, his idea of government would be completely ass backwards and disturbing. The real Jesus and his real position on what the government should do would be all about helping the homeless, feeding the hungry, giving water to the poor, doing whatever you can to make people's lives better. But did this guy even read that part of the Bible? Of course not. Has he ever read the Bible? I doubt it.
So it's a presuppositional approach to government and the church. And the presupposition is Christ is Lord.
So he presupposes that Christ is Lord. That's the problem here. That's not where it ends. You think that's all I've got? Oh boy, it gets worse. A lot worse. Check this one out. Early December 2023.
Today, I want to ask and answer the question, what must you and I do to love our IVF embryonic neighbors as ourselves?
Our IVF embryonic neighbors? What? By the way, just in case you're unfamiliar, IVF means in vitro fertilization. Here's how it works. This is why abortion affects this industry. A couple cannot have a baby for one reason or another. Here's an example. If you don't know women's anatomy, they have two ovaries and then they have fallopian tubes that go into the uterus, right? And every month an egg releases from the ovaries and goes through the fallopian tubes and into the uterus, gets fertilized and attaches to the uterine lining. If it doesn't attach to the uterine lining, then the uterine lining sheds and it starts all over again. In some cases, a pregnancy forms in the fallopian tube. Or even worse, like there are a billion different possibilities for where the pregnancy starts to form. Or a pregnancy forms and it just won't attach to the uterus. That's another problem. In those cases, you can do what's called in vitro fertilization. They basically take an egg cell and a sperm cell and they put them in a petri dish, or a peach tree dish, as our friend Marjorie Taylor Greene would say, and you mix them around and you wait 3 days, basically. You wait 3 days until they've grown a little bit. Then you take one of those embryos, one of those fertilized eggs, and you implant it in the uterus. You connect it to the uterine wall. And then you take the other, however many, 3 or 4 or 5, whatever you got, and you freeze it for future use if you want. That's in vitro fertilization, and it is a method of accomplishing pregnancy where pregnancy wouldn't be possible otherwise. Lots and lots of Christians do it this way. Sometimes, in fact, a lot of the time, you have to discard the old unused egg and sperm, basically. And in a Christian's mind, like this guy, like an extremist nutcase Christian, they seem to think that once you get the one that works and you discard the other materials after implanting the one on the uterine wall, when you discard them, you're literally killing a human being. Complete psychosis. That is not what's happening. Anyway, that's why he's against IVF, in vitro fertilization. I believe in vitro means in the lab, of a process performed or taking place in a test tube. Okay, in vitro means in a test tube, basically. So anyway, that's IVF, and it has given lots and lots of people, Christians included, especially Christians, the ability, the opportunity to have a child where they wouldn't have been able to otherwise. All right, with that context in mind, listen to what he said here.
And answer the question, what must you and I do to love our IVF embryonic neighbors as ourselves?
You understand what he's saying now, right? With that context in mind. Love our embryonic IVF neighbors as ourselves, i.e., when we mix the egg and the sperm cells together, and we take one of those embryos and implant it, literally the size of, God, it's smaller than a grain of rice. It's nearly invisible to the human eye. In fact, it probably is invisible to the human eye at this stage. It's so small. It is 2 cells, basically. And you take that and you implant it in the uterine wall. And he's saying the other ones that were not useful, that we didn't need, those are our embryonic brothers and sisters. What? This guy drank the whole jug of Kool-Aid.
My aim today is, with our Creator's help, graciously to bring before your conscience the harsh realities of IVF so you will respond by faith.
The harsh realities of IVF.
In faith, by loving your embryonic neighbor. Why should this matter to you? Well, we've heard why it should matter. Millions of our embryonic neighbors unnecessarily are being led to slaughter every year by IVF and assisted reproductive technologies.
That is insane. So people take the egg and the sperm cell and they mix them together in a dish. They pull one embryo and they implant it in the mother so that it can grow into a baby. And they discard the other contents, or they even freeze them. You know, they'll freeze the embryos sometimes, just in case. And that's murder. Get help, bro.
IVF and assisted reproductive technologies, and countless others are cryo-incarcerated in frozen prisons.
Cryo-incarcerated? He said incarcerated. I know what he meant. Cryo-incarcerated in frozen prisons. You take embryos, you implant one that was successful, and you put the others in, a freezing chamber or whatever, and they're cryo-incarcerated in a frozen prison. What is going through this guy's head? Where is he in his mind? This is insane on levels I cannot even touch. Does he even understand this process or how it works or anything? I'm not so sure. I don't know. If he does understand this process and he's still saying this, he's psychotic. He is unglued from reality with some of the things that he's saying here. This is just wrong.
Reproductive technologies, and countless others are cryo-incarcerated in frozen prisons. We are creating cryo-orphans for the sake of biological offspring.
Cryo-orphans.
Saints, our longing to bear children with our own DNA must not lead us to treat our embryos in a way that God forbids.
God doesn't forbid us from doing anything with embryos. The concept of embryos didn't exist at the time. As a matter of fact, the only mention of children or babies or pre-birth baby, like fetuses, the only mention of fetuses in the Old Testament, the only mention at all in the Bible, is what happens if you cause a mother to miscarry, and it's a fine depending on how far along she is, basically. In addition to that, the Bible actually prescribes abortion, demands abortion in some cases. If you don't get an abortion, it's a problem. You know why? Abortion was prescribed if you suspected your wife had stepped out on you, she'd done something she wasn't supposed to, if she'd slept with somebody other than you. Now, it's important to maintain the paternity, the patriarchal line of the child, because that's, I don't know, important in Bible times or whatever. So you have to be sure that it's your kid. And if you suspect it's not, you go to the priest, he whips up a concoction and takes the baby out. He induces a miscarriage is what it says. Numbers 5:11-22. That's what it is. The Numbers 5:11-22. Those are the verses. If you want to read them, go check it out. The test for an unfaithful wife. If she stepped out on you, take her to the priest. He'll give her a concoction, and it'll induce a miscarriage if she cheated. That's what God says about abortion. He endorses it. But go on, tell me about the Bible there, Dusty. Or that's his name, right? Dusty? I think it is, yeah. Dusty Devers.
Treat our embryos in a way that God forbids. Is your longing to bear children in your own image leading you to flirt with means of procreation that fail to uphold the sacredness of human life?
It doesn't fail to uphold anything. What are you talking about?
That would lead these embryos or your children to death or a freezer, or deliver them up to destructive experimentation in the name of science. If discontentment is driving you to accept the destruction or freezing of your own embryonic children, you are waging an assault against God, your Creator. And you're doing it through His image bearers.
If you get in vitro fertilization, you're waging war against God and His image bearers. So I take that to mean that he thinks that the moment somebody stands up to get a towel, there's a third person in the room. When somebody goes to use the bathroom, there's a third person in the room. Is that what he's laying down for us? That's what I'm picking up. What about just dudes doing stuff? Is that considered murder in his eyes? Just dudes doing stuff? This is crazy, dude. This is absolutely insane.
And you're doing it through His image bearers. Is He not better than 10,000 children who look like you and carry your DNA?
Sure. I don't understand.
He is.
I don't know what point he's trying to get at with this. This is just like nonsensical garbage. Get help, man. This is insane. He says, unironically, in vitro embryos are in cryo prisons. Cryo incarceration. How do you compete with that on a brain cell level? Like, where is his head with this? Okay, check this out. This is December 13th, 2023. I believe this is after he won his election.
I think it took being honest, being forthright, and it, for me, it takes a lot of hard work, and it took a church who was going to stand.
Obey God, defy tyrants is what his shirt says. Yeah, newly elected senator for Oklahoma. My God, dude, District 32.
A lot of hard work, and it took a church who was going to stand alongside us. I've told people I wouldn't have run if it were not for the church who was going to.
Wow, I guess this is a picture of his family? Question mark? It appears as though he's got a wife, 3 daughters, and 3 sons. Wow, those are a lot of kids. Jesus, dude. In my opinion, 4 kids is a lot. 3 is reaching. 3 is a lot of kids, too, honestly. 2 kids is not quite as bad, but still a lot.
Alongside us, I've told people I wouldn't have run if it were not for the church, who was going to hold me accountable, but also provide lots of wisdom and hard work.
Dude, this guy needs help, for real. This guy needs help. This is insane. What an insane thing to say. What an insane way to view the world around you. Cryo-incarceration is not a word I thought I would ever hear outside of Star Wars. Seriously. Anyway, let me know what you think about this guy in the comments. Sucks that he won, but I don't want you to feel too down about this. You know, we take 5 steps backward, but we take 10 steps forward every single time. Look at how much further ahead we are now than we were in the 1950s. Inevitably, we always take steps forward, always. So don't feel down by this, okay? Just, if anything, just have a good laugh at the absolute nutter buttery that's unfolding before your eyes. Anyway, tell me what you think in the comments.